All right, we are going to get this show on the road. So here we go. Are we going to try it? We're going to try it. I think. Hi, everyone. Welcome to What's Next with Lacey, the first solo episode of What's Next with Lacey. Hopefully the first of many, but we'll see how comfortable I get in this and how ridiculous I look in all of these and how ridiculous I sound in all of these and see whether this continues. But for now, we're hoping the first of many solo episodes of What's Next with Lacey. If you don't know me, I am Lacey. There's a shocker for you right there. I am the founder, host, producer, everything of What's Next. And this is a podcast where I interview young professionals about their career journeys so far. So welcome if this is the first episode you're listening to, and welcome back to my wonderful, supportive listeners who I love dearly and hopefully won't go running for the hills, or at least running to another podcast when they hear this first solo episode. So we'll see. But it's definitely odd. It's definitely an odd feeling to be talking to myself. I'm not really sure where I'm looking, and this is all kind of bananas, but it's okay. We're going with the flow. I wanted to start doing solo episodes because I feel like there's so much more to touch upon than we are able to get into in my interviews with my wonderful, wonderful guests. And I want to start off these episodes with simply the story of what's next. I obviously have my trailer, and you can listen to that as many of you have. But I want to dive in deeper as to why I am even doing this podcast and dedicating time outside of my job to it, and why I'm interviewing the guests that I'm interviewing, and so on and so forth. So let's dive into it. I started this podcast in the end of 2023, though I actually had the idea for it kind of for a while, kind of since 2021, maybe even before. So it took me a while to get started. It took me definitely a long time to take the plunge and get the confidence, get the equipment, because this is surprisingly costly. Little did I know when I started it, but here we are. And yeah, so it took me a while to jump in, and trust and believe, as I'm sure many of you have noticed if you've listened to lots of my episodes, that I was not great to start off with. There's definitely been a learning curve, but with everything, there always is. And yeah, I feel like as I have done more episodes and I've gotten better, I feel like my episodes have gotten better. So I started this podcast not at all because I'm a career guru. I don't think I ever will be. I will never be the type of person to tell someone, or have the ability to tell someone or give some advice on what they should and shouldn't do with their career. I really, really don't have that ability. I'm way too much of an anxious person. I can barely make decisions about my own life and give myself advice, let alone give others advice. So I am certainly not a career guru, and these solo episodes will not be episodes where I am preaching about knowledge that I have. They'll just kind of be musings, as this one is already. So that's not why I started it, but I did start it because I have certainly learnt a few things over my career so far, over the time that I've spent exploring what I should be doing with my life. And one of the main things that I have learnt is the power of informational interviews. I have certainly done a number of my own over the many years that I have been exploring what I want to do with my life. And they are really important, and they have been incredibly valuable to me. I think that informational interviews are so valuable because careers are really hard to navigate. They are one of the biggest aspects of your life. Your work is one of the biggest aspects of your life. What you spend your day doing is obviously going to take up a large amount of time of your life. And I feel like, yes, there are a lot of resources on the very high level of what to do with your career, what is the best way, like what is the best resource to use, how to navigate it, kind of really on this high level. There's a lot of books. There's a lot of people out there on social media. There's a lot of career counselors who are all incredibly helpful. But I feel like what is missing is often the granular detail. Often someone who just tells you like, this is what I'm spending my day doing. So instead of getting advice from career counselors or from whoever from TikTok about like, you should network more, or you should do this more to get your next job, or it's okay if you're changing industries or whatever, I feel like informational interviews give you the advice that you need to know what it actually looks like to change industries in the middle of your career, or what it looks like, indeed, like I said earlier, what it looks like to spend your day doing this job. That is so often not included in conversations that we have with people about their careers. We don't include what internships they did. We don't include what paths they took, what advice they got, that kind of thing. It's all so very high level, which makes sense because there's so many different ways that a career can go. And that high level advice is so important. But I just do think that sometimes it is the information that we get from informational interviews that are often equally as important and often passed over. So that's why I think that informational interviews are so, so important. As I said, I have done a lot of informational interviews in my life. I feel like informational interviews is such a boring way of discussing this, such an unsexy way of talking about this. And so I'm trying like career dates or something like that. I'm trying to think of something better that is a better way to describe informational interviews. They feel so serious. Interviews always have such a serious connotation. So, and I feel like they don't have to be. I feel like they're just like coffee chats, they're chats over drinks, things like that. Informational interviews are not that serious, and people think that they're such a scary thing to do. And they really, really aren't. So anyway, I will keep referring to them as informational interviews, but I really, really, maybe at some point over the course of this podcast, I'll come up with a better name for them. But as I said, I have done a lot of informational interviews. I think in my career, I was trying to think about this earlier, but I think in my career, I have done probably about 200, close to 200 informational interviews. I certainly know that last year, in the year of 2024, I did close to 50 informational interviews. And those chats, I'm just going to say chats. Those chats occurred from everything from reaching out to people on LinkedIn and doing a 15-minute phone call to taking someone out for drinks or meeting someone for coffee. They kind of spanned a whole wide range of different activities and different ways of finding people, of talking to people, and so on and so forth. But obviously they were all incredibly, incredibly helpful. I found them all incredibly helpful. I learned something new about a lot of different careers, a lot of different paths. I got a lot of different advice, which was all so wonderful. And I am so grateful for all of that time that people have spent with me. And obviously I have given back to people who've asked me for informationals and asked me for advice. I just think it's such a great exchange of information and flow of knowledge. So given my path of informationals and given the amount of value I put on them, that is one of my main drives for why I started What's Next. I think that I am so lucky to have had the network that I have to be able to reach out to people. And yes, sometimes that was random people that I don't know, but because of advice from one informational, I got a great little blurb to send to people on LinkedIn or to send to people who I don't know, who a friend of a friend connected me to. I got the staple little note to send to ask for some time to chat. And so I am so fortunate to have that information. So that is, again, like I said, the main reason that I started this podcast. I want people to be able to have access to this information, because sometimes it is really scary and daunting to reach out to people. And sometimes people say no. And if you don't have someone who's connecting you, then people just ignore you. And it's really hard to get your foot in the door to start off this chain of chats with people, of learning about their career. And so, that is why I started What's Next, so that I can bring that information on a wide variety of different careers and bring them to people, to my listeners, to anyone who is interested in learning about that career. Also, I am very much figuring out my own career at the same time. And so I am still doing informational interviews. And so honestly, in a little bit of a selfish reason, I started What's Next to help myself, to learn about different careers for myself, because careers can twist and turn and change on you at any point. And so it is always useful to know what other people are doing and spending their time doing, and know what other people are passionate about and how they got to where they are. So that is the more selfish reason as to why I started What's Next. Forget what I said earlier. That is really the reason that I started this podcast. I also want to talk about what I hope for with What's Next, what I want out of doing this podcast. And obviously, my main reason is to help myself, as I just said. And also, then secondary to that, I want to help other people. And I kind of also want to make talking about careers like cool. Not that it's not cool, but I feel like people so often don't want to spend the time to figure out what they want to do with their life. They don't want to invest that time. And I think that's partly because it's kind of an oversaturated market, and because it's just like a fundamental part of life that we kind of have to do. And because also it's like so different, how everyone views their careers is so different. And also because there is just a lot of people out there talking about this already. And so I kind of want to make talking about careers exciting and cool and interesting, and give people, a little bit of spark of interest. I mean, if we spend so much time dating, trying to figure out the person that we want to spend our life with, why are we not spending the same amount of time and giving the same amount of effort to figuring out what we want to do with our life, what we spend so many hours of our day doing? So that's like kind of my main drive of what I hope for with What's Next, and what I hope people get out of What's Next. Also, sometimes the best lessons can be learned from people who just don't have as public of a platform. And so I want to give people that platform, and I want to provide that link between that platform. So I think also another aspect of what I hope for out of What's Next is often it's super kind of taboo to talk about your career and to talk about the work that you're proud of in your career. It seems like some people are like, oh, that's kind of boastful to be talking about how successful I am, or to be talking about the things I'm proud of in my work and things like that. Or people are like, well, why do people care about what I'm doing? Why do people care about what my successes are in my career? It doesn't pertain to them. Doesn't matter. Instead, what we spend so much of our time talking about with our friends, with our family, is actually what we don't like about our career. We often, at brunch, at lunch, whatever, people spend so much time complaining about their bosses because that's something people can relate to, or complaining about their coworkers or the work product that they're doing or the hours that they are working. But indeed, maybe people feel like, well, not anyone else in my circle is in my industry, so I'm not going to talk about this because they don't understand and it won't be as interesting to them. But we can relate on the fact that, our hours are long, so we'll talk about that instead. But actually, there are so many more people who relate to your successes. There are so many more people who want to be proud of you. So again, I feel like I want to make it not taboo through the conversations I'm having on What's Next to talk about the things that you are doing at your work, to talk about the things that you are proud of, and talk about how cool your job is. So that is part of my mission to, make talking about careers cool. In doing all this, I obviously need people to actually speak to. And I have such a vision for who I want on the podcast, because honestly, my vision is literally anyone and everyone should come on this podcast. And everyone and anyone could come on this podcast. I feel like whenever I approach someone to come on They're like, oh, my story isn't that interesting. What I'm doing is not that cool. And people will find me boring. Like, I just go to work and I come home. That is literally the point of the podcast. I want to know what you do when you go to work and then come home. How did you get that job? What are you doing in that job? And it's so funny in the conversations that I've had so far, you very much see how passionate people actually are about their work. Even though they start off before the episode, they're like, oh, I don't know. Like, no one's really going to be that interested. A, the numbers speak for themselves, but B, so much energy and enthusiasm and passion comes off every single one of my guests when I start talking to them about their career. And it is so fun to see their faces light up and to hear about what they're doing and to see how excited they are about the work that they're doing that they themselves thought wouldn't be interesting. Me, someone who doesn't know very much about their industry, finds what they're doing interesting. And I know a ton of other people also find what they're doing interesting. And that is why truly anyone and everyone should come on the podcast. I would love to have a politician on. I would love to have a celebrity on. I'd love to have someone who is on a more public profile as well, because I want to talk about what that's like. I want to talk about how they got there because they had to do something to get to where they are. And I want to know what they're spending their day doing. I feel like there's so much mystery behind that, just as much as there is mystery behind what a lawyer spends their day doing or what a doctor spends their day doing. So indeed, I want truly anyone and everyone on this podcast. And that's all to say that, listeners, if you have any fields that you want to learn about, if you feel like you want to come on the podcast, just send me a DM. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. Send me a message and I would love to have you on the podcast. I mean, we're already 25 episodes in, if not more. And so there are many more to come. There are certainly many more stories and many more jobs than just 25 episodes. So there is much more to come. I'm like excited. So that's the story of what's next and what I've been doing and spending my time doing. Again, these solo episodes will be quick, to the point, probably a lot of me rambling because I am generally the type of person who spends a lot of time rambling, but they will always include some advice. Maybe we'll get to more of that high level advice that I was talking about, whereas my interviews will give more of that granular advice. But yeah, as I said, I am excited for what's to come with what's next. How I do want to end my episodes, my solo episodes, just to change the tone of the episodes a little bit. I want to end by talking about some things that are not career related. I want to talk about some media, some outlets that I'm absorbing, some things that I find fun and interesting outside of careers and what's next and all of that. So to kick off, a podcast that I have been really enjoying recently is I've recently gotten back into the news. I took a break after the election and it was much needed, but it's time to get back. It's time to get involved and time to be aware of what is happening in our country and around the world. So I've been listening a lot to Pod Save America. That is my new found, or I guess renewed, obsession of the moment. If you don't know Pod Save America, it's a podcast from Crooked Media about just kind of a digest of what's happening in America, hence the name, and the politics that's happening. It's hosted by former speechwriters for the, I believe, Obama administration, all incredibly smart, incredibly knowledgeable, have such interesting takes, and really synthesize what's happening in the world. So it's a great way to kind of understand, get more detail, and secure some facts and figures for when you're talking to people who may not agree with all your viewpoints. A book that I am reading right now, I am hopping on the Atomic Habits train. That is a recent finding of mine. I realized that I'm kind of behind the train and that train has already left the station, but I am very much enjoying that book. I am really in the new year, new me. I mean, it's January, at least when I'm recording this is January. So I am very much trying to, again, new year, new me, refresh, make this year the best year I can. And I thought, why not start with Atomic Habits? And I will say it has been incredibly helpful. James Clear is smart and knows what he's talking about. So if you are looking for that fresh start at any point throughout this year, I highly recommend Atomic Habits. In some music I am listening to, I mean, it's probably everything. I really am the worst person with music, but right now I think I'm listening to the Wicked soundtrack more than anything else in the world. If you haven't seen the Wicked movie, go see it. Anyway, that's it for this first solo episode of What's Next. I hope you enjoyed it. I am hoping that I didn't just send all of my listeners running to the hills, but if you did enjoy it, pass it along to some friends, to some family members, and pass What's Next in general along to friends and family members so that I can help and we can help as many people as possible. So yeah, thanks for listening. Bye.